Hello class, welcome to the next segment in the week 12 material, and in this segment we're going to look a little bit more at CGI scripts, how to actually get them to do something, and also how to diagnose or how to most efficiently diagnose internal server errors if and when they arise. So first things first, we're going to go ahead and get back onto the server, just like we've done so many times before, and then go back into public_HTML. And then here we're going to go back into the CGI file that we created last class. And again, good idea to have the ampersand here when you're working with a CGI script, because chances are you're going to be troubleshooting the CGI script because it's a relatively new concept. You're going to be troubleshooting it pretty often. So that should bring up what we had last time. And this is where we left off, where we did the commands to set the CGI script so that it could actually run. So when we access it from our web browser. Now, here, we're going to go about the process of getting the CGI script to actually display some information onto the web page. Because if you may remember from the previous segment, when we ran the Python command, it just printed out a bunch of HTML stuff. It didn't actually print out any text, and we went to go access it from our web browser. We got a result that looked like this. It doesn't look like anything showed up. So now we're going to actually go through the process of getting the CGI script to actually print some text onto our website for someone to see. Now, one thing that's very important to keep in mind, and I'm going to heavily emphasize this, the CGI script is basically a Python program, which means everything that goes in the CGI script must be valid Python syntax. Bold, italicize, and underline everything that I just said. Everything that goes in the CGI script must be valid Python syntax, because this is essentially a Python program more specifically, that generates the contents of a web page. So if what you put in here does not work in Spider, it's not going to work on the CGI script either. So just something to keep in mind, this is a Python program and everything has to be valid Python syntax. And I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate a common mistake that I often see when it comes to CGI scripts. So let's say you want to get something to display to your web page that's generated by this CGI script. Let's say you want to do something like this, get it to print out hello world. Then you go to save it and go to view what it looks like. You refresh it. That lovely message again. Internal server error. So whenever you encounter an internal server error, there's a couple things that you want to check. First of all, let me bring the command line back by hitting the enter key. First thing you want to check is, did you make the file executable? Or more simply, if you type the ls command, is the name of your file green? So if we check that, type the ls command, well, there's the name of our file. It is in fact green. And if you want to take that a step further and make sure it is properly set up, get down to the really nitty-gritty details, you should see the 3 X's here over on the left-hand side. So there's 1X, there's 2X, there's 3 X's. So we got the 3 X's and the file is green. So that part works. Now, if that all checks out, the next thing that you want to check to make sure is that the Python program can actually run to completion. And the way you do that is you Python your CGI file. So we type out the Python command, python example.cgi, and if there is a problem with the Python file, this should highlight it. And you can see invalid syntax error, and that's the reason why we were getting this internal server error, is because the Python program had an invalid syntax error contained within it. So if your program contains an error, then when you go to access it from your web browser, like we did here, then you'll get this 500 internal server error message popping up. So if you get this internal server error message, 2 things to check. 1, is the file green? Did you run the chmod command? And 2, is the program crashing or failing to compile? And the way you check that is to use the Python command that we did here. And of course, this bit of text that we added in here, that is not valid Python syntax, hence why we got the invalid syntax error. Again, everything goes in the CGI script has to be valid Python syntax. So if we want that hello world to actually show up, we have to encase that in some sort of print statement. And here I'll just use a simple print statement that involves a single set of quotation marks. I'll go ahead and save that. Now if we go back here and hit refresh, you can see we do in fact get some text showing up in the top left-hand corner of the screen. And if we want to, we can go ahead and run this command again now that we've actually fixed the problem inside of the CGI script. And you can see the HTML content that we get from the program now. So now you can see hello world is now encased inside of these pre-tags. Basically, what is contained inside of a pre-tag will be displayed as is, so all spaces and all carriage returns, that is, all lines that appeared within the pre-tag will be honored as is. So let me actually go ahead and demonstrate that. So let me go ahead and put a whole bunch of spaces in between some of the text here. So I'll put some spaces there. This text is Arial, and then I'll go ahead and open a new tab that goes to the index, the HTML file. You see, it doesn't look like the spaces actually did anything. And in fact, usually the just regular HTML, it's only going to display one space at a time. But if it's within, if this were encased within the pre-tag, then all these extra spaces would actually be honored. So let me actually go ahead and demonstrate that with the CGI script. So here I'm going to add some extra spaces. A lot of extra spaces. Perhaps a bit too many. But here, now that this, well, first let me actually show you what the HTML content looks like. So again, still encased within the pre-tag. That's usually where, using this template that's provided, this is usually where you're going to want to put all of your program's output, is in between the pre-tags. But you can see there's a whole bunch of spaces here. And if I go to refresh this, keeping in mind that this is in between two pre-tags, if I go to refresh this page, you can see the world really left the hello here. It's all the way over here. And you can see it honored all the extra spaces that were put in there. So that's the basic idea behind the pre-tag, is it just honors every single space and every single line that is appearing between the pre-tags. And if we want to, we can also go ahead and include some arithmetic, some basic arithmetic. So let's say, again, this is just a Python program that just prints out the contents of a web page. So just like any other Python program, we could put variables in here. So in this case, we set a variable x equal to 10, y is equal to 10 as well, and we can print out what that result is. And if we go over here and Python the example CGI file, you can see this is what the HTML content would look like if we were to run the CGI script. And from our internet browser, if we were to run this right now, this is what it would look like. We just get the number 20 in the top left-hand corner. So if we want to make this a little bit more presentable, we can do something like that. Again, I'll show you what the HTML content looks like with this modification. So running the program, we get this. The example of x added to y is 20. And over in the internet browser, you can see we get a result that looks kind of similar. All right, so this is where things can get, well, actually, let me also go ahead and add some more stuff in here before I demonstrate this. So something like that. So just to refresh our memory what that's going to look like. There we go. Now, there are certain errors that aren't going to generate an internal server error. So compile errors will generate an internal server error. If the file doesn't have the proper permission set, then that will also trigger an internal server error. But sometimes an error will occur within the program that doesn't actually trip an internal server error. And I'll go ahead and demonstrate that by purposefully creating a runtime error. I'm going to take y and divide it by 0. And if you were to try to access this from within your web browser, you would get a result that looks like this. It prints out x is 10, y is 10, but it seems like the output kind of cut itself off there. And the reason why is because this program compiles. Remember, this is a runtime error. This is what we call runtime error. The program compiles and attempts to run, but during the process of running, it encounters an error message or an error that causes it to crash. So the program gets through line 15, line 16, those are perfectly fine. Line 18, also fine. Line 19, also fine. So all that information is getting printed out. Then it encounters what's on line 20 here, which causes it to crash. And since that causes a crash, the program is unable to proceed to anything past line 20. So that's the result that you get when you run the CGI script from your web page, is the output will suddenly disappear. If you get a runtime error message, it will just stop at some point in the middle of the script's output. So if you get something like this, if there's output that you're missing for whatever reason, or seems to be missing, that would also be a good signal to go and run this Python command in your command line, say python example.cgi, and you will get this output. So you can see it did print out some of the HTML content, then it hit that line where we divide by 0, and then it just stopped. It didn't do anything after that. So that's why we got some of the output from the CGI script. That's why we got something instead of an internal server error, but we didn't get all of it. And that's where the browser ended up stopping, because this line right here on line 20 basically caused the entire program to stop running. And so if you're missing output, Python the CGI script. If you're getting the internal server error, check two things. Try Pythoning the CGI script, and also check to make sure the chmod command was properly run. And by that, what we saw in at the beginning of the video, that means check to make sure the file is green, and also check to make sure you have the 3 X's on the left-hand column when you do the ls space -ltr. Now, one thing I also want to go ahead and mention, if you ever end up working with something like this, is let me go ahead and demonstrate what happens if you create an infinite loop, and also how to deal with that in the command line. So I'll say while x is greater than 0, and then I'll just say x is equal to x plus 1. So this is an example of an infinite loop that we kind of saw back in week 3. Now, if you create an infinite loop at some point in your program, this would be the result that you get in your web browser when you try to access a CGI script. You see it just hangs. So because you've created an infinite loop, remember that 4-step process where the browser goes in, looks up the CGI script attempts to run to generate HTML content, but since the CGI script itself does not stop running, is not able to complete the output of the web page, so your browser is kind of left hanging here, and it's never going to load. You could sit here for, well, actually, at some point, it will time out. The process will time out, but you'll be sitting here for a while you're waiting for that infinite loop to resolve itself. So the thing you can do is, if you encounter this in your browser and it seems to hang, you can hit the little X here to say stop loading this URL, or you can just close out of the tab. I just prefer to hit the little X that pops up. On Firefox and Chrome, I think the X is actually over here on the left-hand side of the screen, so Safari is just weird. It's just something you have to deal with. And then if you were to try to Python the example CGI script as it is now with that infinite loop, you can see it also hangs. And if you encounter this situation, you see now I lost the command line. I can't type any commands because I'm running a program that's running indefinitely, and it's not going to give me the command line back until the program is done. So the way that you resolve that is, if you have a command that's running too long or seemingly running indefinitely, then what you can do to terminate that and bring the command line back is to hold down the control key and then hit the C key. So Control C is this keyboard shortcut, and that basically terminates what the process or what the command was. So it terminated this command and then brings back the command line. So this works for any command. So whether it's a Python program, it doesn't matter what the command is, as long as it's still running, doing Control C will terminate that command, whatever it might be, and then bring the command line back. So that should cover most of the issues that you might run into when working with CGI scripts. So again, internal server error, go Python the script and also type ls, make sure the file name looks green on the server, make sure it's been made executable. And if there's output missing, again, Python your CGI script. And if it seems to hang, again, Python your CGI script. And if you get a program that hangs in the command line, or if you've got a command that's running too long for your liking, Control C will terminate that command for you. All right, that's going to do it for this segment. In fact, that should be everything you need to know to accomplish the week 12 homework assignment. There is one sort of supplemental topic that I do want to cover in a next segment, which you might get use out of maybe during the course of this class or maybe afterwards. But that should be everything you need for the week 12 assignment. So if you're interested in what's in the next segment, which we talk about how to actually automatically pull information off of web pages, that's what we'll cover in the next video. But other than that, that's it for the week 12 material.